Welcome to this tutorial. We're going to cover the main menu setup in Unity. So the first thing that we want to do is go to our scenes folder, and you may have more than one scene already created. I have multiple versions of this project. This is just what I currently have. But to create the main menu, I'm going to go right click, go to create, and then you'll find where it says scene. So we're going to create a new scene. Let's go ahead and name this main menu, no spaces, and hit enter. Now, if you're working on the current scene, you do want to save, so we can do Control S or go File Save. Or if you made any changes to your project in general, you might want to go ahead and do the File Save Project. So now we've created our main menu, we need to open it up. So we're going to double click our main menu scene, and that should open up our scene. Now if you happen to start with a 3D game, yours might look different where you have a directional light. In that case, I would first go to Edit, and Project Settings. Will give you a pop-up, and you'll want to go to the Input Manager, no, Editor. Had a brain fart. Editor, and then we're going to make sure the default mode is set to 2D. So if yours was set to 3D, you would want to delete the main menu scene and redo these steps. But mine is set to 2D, so I can continue forward. Everything's set up correctly where I have my main menu. And we can get started with our UI elements. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to create our button, and in order to make any UI elements, we need to store them in a canvas. So all of our main menu is going to be inside of just one canvas. So we're going to right click and go UI, and we could create a canvas and then a button, but that would take longer. If we just create a button, it will automatically add the canvas as well, because the UI button has to be inside a canvas. So we click that, and you can see we can, in our scene view, if we have our mouse over and press F, it'll zoom to where that button is and frame it. So a couple things for our game view. So some people have theirs set up like this. So what I like to do is I'll grab my game view tab and I'll drag it to the side here, snapping it so that we can have it side by side. Then you want to make sure your game view is set to 16 by 9. And you notice just by doing that, you can see like my button is scaling based on the center of the screen here. So we've got our button here, and we've got our canvas. So everything that we create will be inside of our canvas area. Now for our button, we're going to expand the arrow on our button, and you'll see that we have something underneath it, and that's a text object that just says button. We don't need any text because our graphic already has the text in it, so we'll delete that. Take our play button now, and let's just go ahead and rename this play button. There we go. So the next thing that we want to do is our canvas has some settings. So we want to select our canvas and go to our inspector. So we don't need the rect transform right now, and the canvas is set to screen space overlay. That is what we want. But we want to go to our canvas scaler here. Now this one is just keep it at a constant pixel size. Well, we don't want to keep it at a constant pixel size. We want it to scale based on whatever the screen size is. So we're going to click that and do scale with screen size. And then now what we have is a much bigger area but we don't want to do 800 by 600. Most monitors are widescreen, so we're going to go ahead and do 1080p. So we'll do 1920 by 1080. So now that we have our canvas set up to this resolution, this is just what it's referencing, but that's what we kind of want to have looking at. So the next thing that we want is our play button. We notice over here we have all these components that we were looking at before. So we have our rect transform, and with this open, expanded, we can see where everything is. We can grab on our toolbar, we'll grab the actual rect tool, and here we can just scale this graphic up. Now, I'm going to squish it real quick so you can see. Now, the first component that we want to talk about is the image component. We don't need the canvas renderer right now. That is what is rendering the graphic, but we don't need to change any settings. The image component is just what is the default source image. So currently it's the UI sprite. Now what we want to use is our default play button, and with that I can either drag it in, right, like so, or I can click the target symbol and just go to my scene. Oh, there's nothing in my scene right yet, but if my assets, there is, so that's how you would find that. And you can see how naming would be a little bit more helpful. We've got some weird names here, but pretty close. So I'll just go ahead and click the play. That's good to go. Now if I rename this, which I'll just right click, rename it, and I could call it play default. Now if I click on my play button, it knows the actual graphic that I dragged in, and it automatically just changed the name because it's the same graphic, same sprite that's assigned. Now this is the default, and you can see it is stretching however I want it to stretch. We don't want that, and a quick way to fix that is just to do preserve aspect ratio in our image component. So we'll turn that on, and now it will scale perfectly inside our box even if we have some extra space. But this rect tool, that's going to be what our button is, and I probably don't want it this big. It feels big at the moment, but we're going to need some room to have the quit button underneath it and our title and icon. So we have our image button. Now we have the button component, and this is set to color tint, where it'll tint the graphic different colors. Instead, we kind of have our button graphics already set, so we're just going to change this to sprite swap. So we're going to swap out the sprite whenever it's highlighted, pressed, selected, or disabled. So for the highlighted sprite, we can drag in our highlighted and our pressed sprite or click sprite. There we go. And even if we wanted selected sprite, we could put one in there for selected, or create additional graphics as well. Or this would be, put these backwards. There we go. Pressed is the same thing as clicked. And we don't really have a disabled sprite or a different selected sprite, and that's okay. So that's kind of set up for the button component. We can easily click play and do a play test, and you can see when I hover over it, and if I click it, it turns blue, because that is the clicked or selected sprite graphic. So we have that, and we'll go ahead and center this. So if you just click and drag, as you're dragging, you'll see you get these dotted lines. Gives you some default measurements, and we can snap it to the center. You'll see this blue line. Then we can duplicate this by right-clicking or finding the shortcut keys, but we can just right-click, duplicate. We'll name this quit button. drag it down. And because this is the quit, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller because it's less important than the play button. And then again, I'm going to swap out the graphics here. So the first thing is get the default quit, and then I'll put the highlighted and the quit clicked for those. There we have it. So now our button graphics are set up. So the next thing that we want to do is maybe put our background in. So what we're going to do is on our canvas, we're going to right click and go to UI. And for just our graphics that are kind of decorations right now, we're just going to do a UI image. And so here we could set this one up and maybe call it icon, and I can duplicate this kind of placeholder graphic where I'm going to say, okay, this will be our game title. And then to create some text, right? If with the newer versions, you're going to create the Text Mesh Pro because that's the only things available. Whereas with the older versions, you can do text, which actually is kind of blurry. But I'm going to go ahead and scale this out by default. Go to my inspector and change the font color so you can see it. And it's really small. And I want to increase the font size. Now, if you go really big, it's going to disappear, and that's because the text box is too small. So you got to make the text box bigger. Of course, we don't want it that big. And then you have all your typical like Microsoft Word or whatever document program. You've got the standard stuff here where we could center it, align it, center as well. And I could place this need be. And I could look at my game view kind of for the placement. There we go. So then to change these up, right, we also need our background. So I'm going to take the, let's do the game title and duplicate it and scale it out. And I'm going to make it black for right now. And then I'm just going to line it up with our canvas. Now you'll notice now we can't see anything. Let's put it in here. And you'll notice, so the canvas does everything in order, but it's a little counterintuitive. So whatever is going to be listed first is in the very back. So we want to put this all the way at the top, and that will be in the very back. So if you have any special graphics that you want to be on top, they'll probably be closer to the bottom of our stack here. So we have our background in. So our background here, all we need to do is go to our image slot, and you could drag in whatever your background is. And here, of course, once you drag it in, if the color is black, it's applying a tint to it. So we want to make it white. So you can see here, there's my background graphic. Whereas if I make it red, it literally tints everything red. For those that have maybe not seen that before, I could tint everything blue or green, whatever I want to do there. So I could drag in my other UFO background, and you can see, right, the typical color is blue, but if I gave it a slight off color tint or something, I could do that as well. So there we go, we got that set up. Pretty simple. So whatever your game title is, you're going to drag in those graphics. Make sure you do preserve aspect ratio when you need to. So I don't want my title or my icon being stretched, so I'm going to make sure to do preserve aspect ratio. And then you're going to want to look at your game view and line these up. So you can see there's a little bit more of a gap here that looks awkward. So maybe I'll take these and pull them up just a little bit. There we go. That feels a lot better. Sometimes you just have to look at the game view and kind of get an idea. Maybe there's still too much of a gap. The one thing that you want to consider is you do not want your graphics to be on the very edge, because different screens could chop off those graphics. So we want to have those placed. And again, use the blue lines to line everything up. If for some reason you're not seeing those, it could be because you have the rect transform minimized. You got to have that expanded, and you also have to have your gizmos on. If you have that off, it's going to be kind of hard to see that. So you just click the gizmos button on, and then you can line this up. So everything is going to be sizing to the anchor point, which is right. All of these are set to the center of the screen, which if we looked at our rect transform, that shows middle center, right, middle center of the whole screen. So just kind of making sure everything's nice and lined up. Voila. There we go. And then the next thing, let's see, we can the next thing we want to do is we're going to create an empty for our main menu. May change how we do this later, but it's very popular to create some kind of menu manager or level manager or something like that. So we're going to right click on our canvas and create an empty. It's really important that you right click on the canvas so that we're creating a UI empty element. And you'll know this because all UI will have a rect transform. So this is not the normal transform component, it is a rect transform. So here I can just call this, let's do main menu, maybe manager, manager, there we go. Then we can go in and go ahead and create our script for that. So we'll right click, create C# script, and we can just call this main menu, all one word, no spaces. And we'll take our main menu object here, once the inspector loads, and drag that script onto our game object. And this game object, we can zoom in and we can just put it anywhere. It doesn't really have a graphic because it's literally just our menu manager. It's just going to be what object's holding our script for right now, so that we have that available. And I think that is good to go. If you have TextMesh Pro, you'll have some advanced text effects that you can do, even to kind of get it close to matching if you wanted to. The regular text component is pretty not so great. You can see it's blurry in the scene view, and in some cases it can be blurry in the game view. As long as you're increasing the font size, that should help prevent that. But the TextMesh Pro text is definitely better, but there's a whole lot more settings and things that you can do as well with TextMesh Pro. All right, until next time.